Thank you to our listeners and our viewers for tuning in today. And before I get started and introduce our guest, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever looked at a plate of food, a glass of wine, or a bag of chocolate and thought, why can't I just have more willpower? But what if the real issue isn't willpower, but something much deeper? And that's what I'm going to talk with my guest today, who's joining us, a subconscious healing expert, certified nutrition consultant, Sandy Zeldes. You're a spiritual cowgirl, a former celebrity chef, and a subconscious transformation expert with over 20 years of experience. And I'm so delighted to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Angela. Pleasure to be here. Been looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah. As I introduced you, you seem to have had many roles and almost lived many lives in one life.
Totally.
And
By now, yes.
yeah, you've done so many things. And if we were to meet you in the season of your life where it all started, what is it that shifted for you that changed everything?
Well, you're getting right to the point. I'll tell you that all these years working primarily with women, I would say almost 100% now women, successful, high achieving, but also working moms, typically over 40, silently battle with this issue, right? With the food cravings or the extra glasses of wine or all kinds of different things that they're using, but feeling a lot of shame about it and guilt, self blame, self critique, and feeling like it's this silent problem and issue that they have, right? But it's actually quite common and it's an epidemic out there. And I was once there too, and I'm going to get specific about that. So, what I've done is blend my trauma healing techniques or belief healing, it's subconscious work. It's not just trauma, of course, with nutrition. And it's the most effective thing effortlessly. It makes dieting obsolete. That's external, right? So that's staying on the external fixation, right? So what happened for me was I have a long version and a short version. I'm going to try to keep it short. I spent my whole life from the time I was little obsessed with health and healing and organic foods and was an early adopter with farmers markets, worked at health food stores through college, even studied health and healing basically in college and then later nutrition. But I still struggled with cravings. So knowledge wasn't enough. Information wasn't enough. You have to be able to implement it, right? There were two, I talk about this a lot, but there were basically two pivot points. One was when I stopped struggling with what to eat, the actual what, right? Because I thought I knew everything about food and nutrition and healing and spent a long time in that world teaching cooking classes, as I said, steeped in nutrition, but I still was hungry. So I solved the first piece, and that was miraculous, profound, paradigm shifting, but it didn't always, I wasn't always able to implement. Does that make sense? It's
Mhm.
clear, right? So, for example, when I was stressed out or when I was working a really stressful job, I used to work long hours on my feet, catering and for very high profile people. And I used to get really nervous. Gosh, it's so long ago now. It's funny. You're right. I've had many lifetimes, but I used to get really scared. And no matter what, no matter how many jobs I did, it didn't matter how many times I'd done it, the same thing. I'd get really anxious and self-critical and perfectionistic. And um, it's little Sandy. I want to send myself there. Anyway, and when I think back on it now, and so nothing was good enough, right? And so it's the same old themes that we're going to talk about today. And so I'd have that glass of wine, just one, but with dinner, and then I'd be snacking, and then I'd be hungry. And I was like, gosh, I already, had a full dinner, but it was the anxiety, right?
Mhm.
And so that second pivot point was so critical, and it's the one I focus on the most now because it's the one that truly changes everything for my clients who have tried every diet, truly. And there's a new one every day out there, and or pill or shot or this or that. But if you can't take action for yourself, self-care. If your self-care is out the window and you just can't get it anything aligned, and you're still eating even when you're not hungry, or finding yourself in the fridge, or the extra wine that people have, or the drinks, something else is going on, right? And so
Mhm.
that's where we start typically.
Yeah, and I think that I really love that you're not offering this, you're just not working hard enough, or you just need to do
No. Yeah.
these extra steps that are all about us not being enough and us not doing enough, but really peeling back the onion and going, you know what? You're doing your best given this situation. And what we really need to do is focus on the healing. And like you mentioned, many women listening here today have tried all of those fixes for their
Mhm.
relationship with
Absolutely.
food. So, when did you realize that something was happening beneath the surface that was beyond those external diets and trying to find the trendy foods to eat and things like that?
Well, as I said, so it was after I went back to study nutrition, early 30s, and so 25 years ago. And I realized what to eat. It worked. And then it was very quickly, they were back to back. It was the same time period. So 25 years ago or so, I was in school in multiple ways. So I was studying and becoming an advanced practitioner of EFT and using it, of course, on myself, and realizing that, wow, look, I'm not craving things anymore. I'm not struggling anymore. I
Mm.
wasn't specifically working on the food issue, but it doesn't matter what you work on. You work on your stress and it clears everything else. That might sound, and I know people don't understand that. I get that doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but really, the only reason why we eat when we're not hungry, or we're snacking when we don't want to be, or excuse me, or we're unable to stop ourselves, even trying to use willpower or with the best motivation and the most desire, is because there's something going on under the surface, and that's typically under the category of anxiety.
Mhm.
There's something we're feeling that is
Mhm.
overwhelming, and we cannot fight our own feelings. It does not work. It will never work. Your feeling state, if it's coming from a deeper place, you can't force that down. That's why people struggle. And they want to. They're so intelligent and they have so much knowledge. And then it's a vicious cycle of beating yourself up and blaming yourself because you can't stop yourself, even though you know better.
So you mentioned EFT. If there's somebody who's listening and doesn't know what that is, can you give us a short little summary of what EFT is?
Absolutely. So that's the tool I use, and I've been using it for 30 years. And it's a tool that's been around for 35. It's very well known in the therapeutic circles. It's become more popular in the last 15 years or so. It's emotional freedom techniques, and it's using meridian points, traditional meridian points that have been mapped out for thousands of years. And you don't have to believe in it, you don't have to understand it, you don't have to know what it is. It works. We use it with animals. I've used it with everybody. It's just knowing how to get to it's surgical to get results, though. Get
Mm.
rid of the kind of results you want. That obviously is different, but it's a tool that was developed again and pioneered with therapists. I came to know about it a long time ago, and it was part of what I was using. And it's just so profound, so simple when it's used correctly, gentle, and it's the subconscious clearing. I call it subconscious because we're aware of a craving, we're not aware of why,
Mhm.
or we're feeling perfectionistic, but we don't
Mhm.
know how to stop that.
Mhm.
And we don't even know we can, I think,
Right.
actually. So that's why it's unconscious to us. Why? The why and the why matters, that we heal it, literally release it, or it's just going to keep. So
Mhm.
we pull out that root. I mean, I always say this example, but I think it's really effective. We pull out the root and the leaves on the tree don't regrow. That's the goal. Does that make sense? So people always say, this won't
Mhm.
last. No, it will. And it does. And it always does if it's done correctly,
Mm.
because we're not working on the surface. There's
Mhm.
not another diet. It's
Right.
not another exercise plan. It's not
Mhm.
outside of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. Healing has been a large part of my entrepreneurial journey, and I've had so many conversations with entrepreneurs. And why I think this conversation is so important to have is that as a business owner, there are no skeletons in the closet. Everything comes out in how you run your business or whether it's successful or why it's stalling. And so I love to help listeners discover new ways to understand themselves on how to be more successful in their lives and their businesses. But in that journey of my own healing, it was so surprising to learn
Mhm.
how much
Yep.
is our subconscious is
Yep.
running everything that we all
Everything.
day, like 90%, I
That's
believe,
right.
like
That's
that.
right. So my client, so famously they call me their secret business coach, and but I love working with the body stuff because it opens
Mhm,
the door every other piece for people,
mhm,
right? So the clients I
mhm,
work with, they're already really successful, but
mhm.
they're really stressed
Right.
usually and anxious
Mhm.
and doing too much. They don't know they don't have to, by the way. And so they're overworking, under delegating typically. They don't know. They're just
Right.
working so much and they're typically they're selling themselves short a little bit in some area, but it doesn't matter. It all has to do with some of these unconscious blocks. And so they come in for the cravings, they go out with a more successful business
Yeah.
because we cleared the blocks. The blocks that are blocking them with the food are blocking them with money and love. So relationships with their kids
Mhm.
typically get much better. I mean,
Yeah.
every time get much better with their
Mhm.
husbands. And then, their confidence levels, which is natural. They're not
Mhm.
working at it. It just is an outcome
Mhm.
when we clear the noise that's
Right.
in the way.
Yeah. As a Reiki practitioner, I definitely understand that. It's how we're feeling and what's living subconsciously just matters so much. And that's why I love when you say your cravings aren't about food, which we think it's about the food, but it's about the wounds to be healed. And so, can you walk us through what it really means for a woman who's listening who may be exhausted from dieting and still feels like she's stuck? And I think it's particularly important to talk about this because we live in a society that kind of emphasizes not feeling and being happy all the time.
Well, and I think a lot of people get afraid, like of
Right.
certain feelings, and it depends
Sure.
on how they're raised. Like
Hmm.
some of my clients, issues around communication or speaking up to certain
Right.
people or communicating clearly without being triggered or getting
Hmm.
upset. So it happens where people just are really feel blocked about their worth, their self-confidence. But self-esteem is just this general category, but what's under it are the events that made you
Hmm.
feel that way. And so I'll just illustrate by example, talking about a client who's a professional. She would get so stressed when she'd have to do group meetings, and it's her business. It was a very successful business. She's pretty well known in her world. And but it still stressed her. People think, oh, you're in charge. No, no. It would cause her so much anxiety that she almost couldn't do it. And even after 20 years of having her own business, it was almost 20 years and maybe 15. But she would get so anxious about it. And then, of course, the cravings. But most of all, she would just get really perfectionistic about how she looked, which a lot of women do. But nothing had changed. Okay. But she would suddenly look in the mirror and be so critical she couldn't even function. It's interesting. And this is a very common theme for
Hmm.
women who are professional and need to be out there. And her weight had not changed. Nothing had changed. And all we did was clear the root causes of, okay, there's lots of pieces. It wasn't like this isn't like so simple, really. It's simple, but it's not to get to the pieces that were causing her to feel this way. And it was
Hmm.
fast once we did it. And she'd look in the mirror and be like, I don't get it. Why was I so self-critical an hour ago or 2 hours ago? And days, do you know what I mean? Working together.
Hmm.
It's fast in that sense, right? once you clear why you're so stressed, which always came down to just old, typically events that have happened to us, that's how it's all stored. That's how we
Hmm.
create belief structures. In my
Hmm.
experience working with people, I'm sure we could cite studies, but working with people, I have seen this. The pattern is the belief structures come later after events and repeated events that have been very challenging. We often don't know. It seems very innocuous to us, right? And so for her, the perfectionism just took over, that she wasn't going to do it right, say it right, which is very common, as you
Hmm.
know. So perfectionism, and then wanting to control, and then just beating herself up, right? Which goes into a shame spiral. And then
Hmm.
the food suddenly becomes interesting. Another, like it's a comfort and a soother, and it numbs you out. It's to numb out from these painful feelings. And
Right.
it works. It works. It
Hmm.
works for people. So I always say, well, let's thank the food. Like, it's working. It's doing the job you want it to do, but let's address why we need it. And another client, it had to do more with communication, the pattern. Anytime she had to communicate something was that felt important to her, to family members and colleagues, she would just go into a spiral and she wouldn't know why. And how are you feeling? What's going on? What did you just have to do? And oops, yes, I don't want to have this conversation. So it's such a pattern that we do that we don't see our own. Typically, people don't see their own patterns. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's really unconscious because it's worked. It just numbs you out. It just works.
Hmm.
And so people are afraid of their feelings if they haven't addressed them, but they're really simple. The feelings are very fluid and they can move very quickly if you let them. And once you get
Hmm.
that experience, you're like, oh, this feels good to just be done, as opposed to like hanging on to something.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I thought about before when you were talking about how, so many of these subconscious beliefs manifest as anxiety and maladaptive behaviors. But instead of trying to suppress those, once we shift our mind to seeing them as messengers,
Absolutely.
instead of
Yeah.
something that we need to suppress and get rid of or fix, um,
No,
that's
never
just such a game
fixing.
changer,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, that this, especially a perfectionistic way in which we try to present ourselves, is a common theme because so many women attach their worth to how they look or how they perceive themselves, looking to others. So, what are some of those common subconscious mindset blocks that you've dealt with your female clients?
Well, I think perfectionism is a symptom of,
Yeah.
like you said, when we don't feel good, right? Ourselves for whatever reason. And there's
Mhm.
so many ways in which this operates. And so there's so many patterns involved. They can stem
Mhm.
from typically when we're in a pattern of perfectionism, it always goes back to learned. There's something we learned in childhood about communication, ourselves, and then we're playing that repeatedly over and over, right? It could be many different patterns. Patterns we learned about our bodies, the way we look, being put on diets for a percentage of my clients, that'll be an issue, or the way their mother obsessed with food, or somebody in their family, or feeling they can't communicate or speak up or say no, or just not good enough for various reasons. And it's always from a deeper level. That's why people get so stuck with it. That's why it's so hard to shift because they don't know why.
We were just talking about all of the subconscious mindset blocks that women often come to you with, like the perfectionism and how they look. So, what are some of the other mindset blocks that women often don't realize is holding them back from
Yeah.
realizing their worth and their potential?
Yeah. So one that I think sometimes makes a lot of sense to people, but they don't see how it operates in their lives is safety and protection. So we're in a comfort zone, for example. It keeps us safe for whatever reason. So that comfort zone, we can blame our bodies for, not wanting to do something,
Mm.
right? And it's very subconscious. That is like, because on the surface, people say, but I don't want this weight, or I hate it, or I can't look in the mirror, no matter what their weight, by the way, whether they want to lose 5 pounds, because I get a lot of that, or 60, it's, this feeling that it's just, I've got to get it off. So they don't relate to the safety part as much. They might know it's there, but frequently it's one of the more complicated ways in which we protect ourselves is staying in a comfort zone.
That brings a question to mind. So, do we subconsciously sometimes have the added weight as something that protects us?
Yeah, I think all the time. I think 100% of the time. Yeah, we just don't
Oh,
know why.
interesting.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a complicated reason. I worked with many people who've had repeated sexual abuse. That's an obvious way in which we might protect ourselves. But it could also be, there's a category of women I work with that have had incredibly difficult relationships. We could categorize them as with a narcissist. And there's a subconscious need to never get in another relationship, or just all the complicated issues with being able to get in another relationship. And we protect ourselves from having anyone come towards us. That's really common. So, healing anything about relationships is usually very important for a lot of the women I work with at any age, by the way. Recently worked with someone in her late 70s, and that was an issue. And she's not looking to date. It's not like she wasn't interested. It doesn't matter. The body is keeping, is still holding this
Mhm, mhm,
subconscious in your body, in my experience. And so that's really common. Also, just protecting you from feeling like being social. So, one of my clients had lost her husband 10 years previous to working together. And there were a lot of other things that had happened before that. And it's like a bucket that fills, right, of things that have happened. It's typically like that. It's not
mhm,
one thing. And she just could not take off the 60
mhm,
pounds, more than 60 pounds. And she'd spent a fortune on
mhm,
really good programs, done
mhm.
everything right. And of course, couldn't get into action. She was just eating in a way that was just really making her feel bad. But most of all, she was very, very depressed and really unhappy. And interestingly, the protection of the weight was helping her to keep from having to be social during this really hard time of everything
Mhm.
she'd been through. And she had become a hermit, right? So it had nothing to do with dating or relationships in that regard. It was protection from life. And so for her, healing that exponentially rapid results, just crazy fast for her. First, she got her mood and energy back, was the really fast thing.
Mhm.
Cravings were like right there with that within 2 weeks. And then the weight loss came right after. But it
Mhm.
was just a side benefit. She didn't care anymore about it. That's how it really works. It's
Mhm.
not the issue, it's a symptom of all this other stuff. And so it's not about dieting. She wasn't even thinking about all that. She was just so excited to do all this healthy stuff just because she was excited. She wanted to feel good suddenly. She wasn't trying to hide. And she started reaching out. She joined a book club, which was great. She was 68 and she finally wanted to be social again. She missed community. It was a huge thing for her to get back out. And she got her life back. And she ended up retiring. And I've told this story many times. And it was really sweet. That's what I mean by the protection. Does that make sense? Lots of ways in which it can operate. And when it's there, there is no fighting it. You cannot fight your subconscious. It is not going to work. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. That's why people get so frustrated.
Yeah,
So
it's really incredible the invisible blocks that can exist for
it's
us
crazy. Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
have no idea. And what I think is so promising and what I really love is this information gives us permission to stop beating ourselves up because we think it's our
Absolutely.
fault.
Absolutely. And that's the first thing I always say is like, there's no shame and blame. If you could have, you would have. You're smart enough You have enough information. You
Mhm.
don't need another diet, although sometimes I help people in that regard. I have a background, and clearly there's an area in which I can help people with cravings, but it's not about that, right? And we all need different things at different times in our lives. There's an intuitive approach to that. And so people are able to implement after they clear their blocks, in a way that works for them, that's effortless. I tell the story of a client who lost 8 pounds over Christmas when she used to gain a bunch without dieting, especially without dieting. She ate everything. So at 48, it wasn't like, oh, well, she's young. No, it's not our age. It's not our age. It really isn't. It's our blocks. And I've seen this over and over. I say this from experience, not from, oh, no, you can do it. No, you can do it. But the thing is, we don't know what we don't know. All of us, we're all built this way. And I assume if something isn't working, I must be blocking it. Like I must be, right?
Right.
And it's not that there's so much hope in that and there's so much good news in that, but it's also, it's just how we're built. The subconscious is like keeping everything, records of all of it, and putting up all this fear, worries, doubts, anxiety. And that's the stuff that really blocks us. And so most of my clients are entrepreneurs or creatives. I've worked with celebrities and opera singers, and it's very fun. It's very fun to see people just let go of the inner stuff that's holding them back, and they do things that are miraculous. You would never be able to do. It's just not normal. I had one woman I worked with, younger woman, who wanted to sing opera at a age that no one said you could do it. I don't even want to give the age out there because I don't even want to put that out there. That people think it, but I didn't know that world. But she'd known this world and performance, and her family were performers. And anyway, she started doing it in New York, did it. And she was asked to join different, and it was all through just clearing a lot of internal noise. People, it's about food. Well, it's about anxiety. And what's your anxiety from is the question.
Yeah.
And anyway, so the roots are deeper, right? So we want to address the root, not the external.
Yeah.
And then you don't need the food. You don't even think about it. One of my clients used to binge on ice cream when she would work. She was a very petite woman, but her thing was ice cream, and she couldn't work without ice cream, and she would gain weight while she was an artist, a creator of a brand, a famous brand, but she hated herself when she was like creating the next project, and so she just beat herself up, the self-critique, the criticism, the perfectionism, the whole thing. And sure enough, we worked on the root causes, which of course were long ago created. And she didn't even think about ice cream anymore. It wasn't about ice cream. And she was able to work without doing that, without feeling so much stress and self-critique. And guess how much energy that frees up for creativity and inspiration? So she lived by inspiration, which is our goal. That's why I love what I do, is because the goal is to live through inspiration, not self-critique and shut down. And she was able to create her best project ever, simply, effortlessly, with no, just sending an email out and someone said yes. And like it doesn't have to be hard, right? We make it hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And as I mentioned before, we live in this time of quick fixes and instant gratification and the next drug that's going to help you lose weight. And when you see these either medications or new diets, what is it that you just wish that you could tell women who are considering these things to fix what they consider is their problem?
And it's different people. I'm speaking to a group that struggled for a long time.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone's different out there.
Sure.
But if you're someone who has spent a lot of time, not just a
Mhm.
little bit of time,
Mhm.
usually your whole life, focused on food, there's a reason. And I would urge people to just become aware that maybe it isn't another diet that's going to fix this. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? You would have fixed it by now if you could have.
Uh-huh.
Let's get you free. Let's get you food freedom and
Mhm.
peace with your body. And yes, it's possible. I've been doing it for 20 years. 100% it's possible. We just have to know, we have to go in and do the deeper work and do
Mhm.
it correctly. surgically, I call it emotional surgery, and clear why, we have the body image and the
Hmm.
food anxiety. And it works.
Yeah.
And it is
Well,
possible. People don't believe it's
sure.
possible. I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
tell you how many times I have to hear that. Yeah, I
Oh,
hear
yeah.
it all the time. It's the
Right.
number one people think. And of course it's not, it hasn't been possible yet because we're
Mhm.
focusing on the wrong thing.
So, for that person who is feeling, okay, this might be something that will help me on my healing journey and help me with my relationship to food, what is a good place to start with themselves as they endeavor on this journey?
Patience and compassion. And I know compassion is very hard for a lot of us to have at times, especially when we're frustrated. But maybe just really be kind to yourself. And I always tell my clients, think about if they don't have kids, their pets, or think about your kids
Mhm.
and think about how they would feel, right? Put yourself in that position. Like you're the child. Be kind to yourself. Seriously. Really think about having compassion that there's something else going on and it did
Mhm.
affect you. Because
Mhm.
we're really hard on ourselves. We think, oh no, I can do anything. Oh, no,
Mhm.
no, no, I should be okay. That was no big deal. And you know what? When we create these patterns, it was a long time ago. Typically, if it's a
Right.
lifelong pattern, we didn't have the resources. We were young. Your
Mhm.
subconscious just imprints things. It is what it is. It's not because we're broken. It's not because your body's broken. It's not because there's anything wrong with us. It's just encoded in now a pattern, and we just want to be done with it. We just want to move on.
Right.
And in a way that's healthy and
Mhm.
natural with much less effort than struggling with our willpower, because that's never going to work. That's why we fail.
Yeah. No, it's actually because our brain was trying to protect us. We had this emotional reaction to a situation and it hardwired, okay, when this happens again, this is what we do
Right,
to
right.
protect us.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
I think it's so powerful. And two, I know you mentioned that oftentimes when you work with clients, when they heal themselves, they also mend their relationships with their children, their
Absolutely.
family
Every time.
members. Yeah. And so
Every time.
I know
Yeah.
that women that I work with who have a hard time with that self-compassion or putting themselves first or their self-care, sometimes a reminder that doing this work is going to be the best thing for your family.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many relationships I've helped restore. Seriously. Like, I'm actually quite proud of that. People really loving their husbands again instead of being
Mhm.
resentful and cranky and frustrated. And that's actually one of the number one outcomes. And
Mhm.
also just not feeling critical or cranky and irritable with their kids and hating themselves for that, but just feeling really frustrated and irritable. And they're busy and they're working a lot. And then they come home. And so that's a typical pattern, that afternoon drink and then the
Mhm.
snacking and the frustration when they get home. Or if they're working from home, that period of time when the kids come home and everybody.
Mhm.
Anyway, so that's a very important time. And that all clears up every single time I work with
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
because it's all the same stuff. It's all the same core issues we're working with. So, why are they frustrated and irritable? Are they communicating? Do they
Mhm.
know they're not communicating? They don't know. Do they know they can communicate? Like, I think I told this story recently on another podcast about a client who I think she was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, and she had no idea. This is unconscious stuff that it
Mhm.
would be operating because it was so long ago. You're like, oh, I can't believe my brain knows. That's not how it works. Until we really address painful patterns that are really strong, it doesn't, our belief structures come out of that. So
Mhm.
anyway, so she was raised very traditionally, but she was very modern in her
Mhm.
life and could not relate to when we uncovered all this. So she's like, that's crazy that that's impacting me. But she totally felt that it was when we cleared it, like when we pulled it up to the surface. She was raised, women don't do this, they don't do that, and they do this and this. And so she was fighting against it, but really being mad at her kids and her husband, right? Because like they're not doing anything. Well, she had never asked. I can't tell you how many women don't that I work with don't feel okay about communication, and it gets really complicated and then it gets really stressful. And there's a lot of work we do there with healing the patterns, releasing. It's just releasing. I'm not a therapist, it's release work. They can be their own best therapist after that. And it becomes so beautiful to communicate. And their husbands are dying to help. Typically, the women I work with have husbands that do want to connect. And anyway,
Yeah.
so and so that particular time, it was the frustration and the anger and the binging on the chocolate to make her feel better. And so when we cleared all of that, she was able to get her needs met and have more free time. She couldn't believe it. I mean, she couldn't believe it. Go take a class that really fed her soul, it was what she wanted to do. Everyone has their own self-care stuff or things
Right.
that feel good, that didn't take away from her family at all. Her goals and her values were very family oriented, which all my clients who have kids,
Yeah.
you can have the value. In fact, a lot of my clients will work a lot less and want to be with their kids more and make more money because they're already very successful. Like they don't know what they don't know, that they don't have to kill themselves working. They can have what they want. They just didn't know. Does that make sense? Like,
Oh, yeah.
and it's magic. It's
Hmm.
inspired living as opposed to fearful and
Hmm.
driven and forcing yourself and and killing yourself out of these old patterns. And so like,
Sandy, yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
I could go on and on about
No, I
stories
know.
because they're so inspiring. And people
Yeah.
don't realize they can have that, but they can. They can. It's just doing this inner process.
Yeah, that's the goal of this podcast, to help women understand that they can do that, and live the life that they want to on their terms, and not be
Absolutely.
controlled by their relationship with food or old subconscious patterns. And so, if there is a mom listening, that all of the moms listening, actually, if you could whisper one truth in their ear that would help them look at themselves better next time in the mirror that they see themselves, what would that be?
Well, there's so many things, but I just love saying that our bodies aren't broken,
Hmm.
and food is a blessing and should be nourishment and fun and pleasurable, not torture. And to realize that you can have that. That's a
Hmm.
real thing, and that's how it should be. And returning our our peace with food in our bodies is truly will change every other aspect of our
Hmm.
lives.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's in such an important message this time of year that we're airing this conversation. So many people are reevaluating for the new year where their life is going forward. And so, too, I love that you're reminding us too, just not to accept what our situation is. And I think that's so important, especially as we get older. We think, oh, I can't change. I'm such and such age, or this is just how it is after menopause, or after the kids are grown, or after I have
Well,
kids.
I'll tell them that that's who I work with. So
Right.
everybody who feels like after a certain age, I don't think I have clients, under 45. And I mean, some are in their early 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I've
Hmm.
even got 80s sometimes. It's not about age,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is amazing to watch, really, truly.
And it's never too early to start.
Never too early to start.
It's
Realizing that, hey, don't do this. Don't wait till you're
right.
50. I tell the younger
Right. That's what
girls,
I'm saying,
don't be like us, don't wait. Do not wait. It doesn't get better with
Yeah.
time and
Right.
more knowledge. It will not get better. It gets worse because you ingrain a pattern
Right.
and you beat yourself up for so long, right? So it gets harder. Well, it gets worse on you. You miss out on opportunities, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is I don't want my listeners to live with regret. And
No, yeah.
so I think that this just really helps you live your life to the fullest potential if you're struggling with your relationship with food. And so, Sandy, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. If somebody's listening and wants to take that first step towards healing their relationship with food, where can they connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, I've really appreciated you having me on. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So the best place to find my work is sandyzeldes.com. We'll have the name and the link in the show notes. And also, we've created a special page for them at sandyzeldes.com/gem, GEM,
Love
for
it.
your page. And then there's a couple options. I have a free audio that helps them experience just a short tapping audio to address food cravings and stress and anxiety, just to feel what it feels like. It's a very short audio, really nice. And then I have a course, Daily Om. It's my best-selling course for many years on Daily Om. It's a holistic or natural health platform that focuses on kind of spirituality and health, and so that course link is there as well. And then I also have a page that they can fill out an assessment form if they want to talk about getting started working together.
I love it. It's such a great time of year to consider, how you're living your life and reevaluate things and how you want your year to go. But anytime you're listening to this is it's never the wrong time to just start improving your life. So thank you so much for all the permission you gave listeners today and just sharing that we need to stop beating ourselves up.
Absolutely. That's number one. Yes, absolutely. Because if we could have, we would have,
Right.
right? It's not for lack of desire and motivation. So go easy out there and learn how to eat like a goddess instead.
I know. I love that so much. I love it. Thank you so much, Sandy. It's been great.
Thank you, Angela.